Hello and welcome to a Champions League preview podcast, which ordinarily, there's a word I'm finding difficult to say, ordinarily would have been exclusive to our Patreon members, because that is what we do. If you're hearing this on the main feed and you don't recognize the music, that is the music for our preview podcast. The commentary in Spanish talks about Ben White scoring El Sexto, the sixth goal. It has nothing to do with sex dolls, unwhitened or otherwise. And this is what we do for all the Premier League games, for our Champions League games, and for the big cup games. We do an exclusive podcast for our Patreon members. But because of the way the podcast schedule is this week, it's all a bit up in the air. James is away. We couldn't do an Arsecast extra today. We're doing that for you on Wednesday after the PSV game. I said we'll make our preview podcast available to everybody. So it'll be available to our Patreon members in the usual place and available to you if you're listening now on the main Arsecast feed. So welcome along. And with me, as always, nearly always, to do these podcasts is Lewis Ambrose. Good afternoon, Lewis.
Good afternoon, Andrew. How did you enjoy your weekend? Did you get up to much without Arsenal, the men's team anyway, in action?
I sort of had a lot of not thinking about football time, which was kind of great. My favourite football moment of the weekend was being in a pub yesterday afternoon for a quiet Sunday afternoon pint. Manchester United were on, playing Fulham in the FA Cup, and I met a 3-month-old Bernese Mountain Dog puppy, which was far more interesting than the game in question. So
far more capable than Manchester United as well, probably.
Yes, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. I don't want to sort of say something now that might come back to bite me on Sunday when we play Manchester United in the Premier League. But yeah, it was kind of...
I'm not saying we're capable right now. I'm just saying they aren't.
It's an incapable off then on Sunday is what you're saying.
It could be.
It could well be. I felt like, to be honest, after the draw against Nottingham Forest, which, in isolation, I've talked about this, I don't think is a bad result per se, but I feel like Mikel Arteta, the players, and certainly fans, it didn't do us any harm not to see Arsenal not score again this weekend.
Yeah. I thought that after the Nottingham Forest game, and then sort of got to Friday, and I was like, I would quite like to watch the team again this weekend. I don't know, glutton for punishment maybe.
Yes.
After sitting through the Forest game, the West Ham game before that, I just want to see Arsenal score a goal again, and I don't think that should be too much to ask.
I don't think so. It's not a lot to ask, and we will talk about that in a bit of detail in a couple of moments' time. But I did want to start with a story that's sort of breaking this morning, or has broken this morning, about our search for a sporting director. And Fabrizio Romano reports that Andrea Berta is the man looking most likely to get the job. He is currently unemployed. Another way of putting that is available. Some of the other candidates that we have been linked with, for example, Roberto Olabe at Real Sociedad and the guy at Monaco, will have to complete their work at those clubs until sort of May, June anyway, and then they would be available for a move to Arsenal, assuming there's no issue with something like gardening leave or anything like that. I was doing a little bit of reading up on this guy, and he's been at Atletico Madrid since, I think, 2015. He came in as a technical director. He's an Italian. He started in the world of banking and moved into football. I think he worked with Genoa and Parma before moving to Spain. And he's been sporting director at Atletico Madrid, or was until January of this year, from 2017 until 2025. An interesting candidate. When you look at the transfer business that Atletico Madrid have done down the years, I think when anyone is there for a long period of time at a club, there's going to be hits, there's going to be misses. But in very broad terms, and they are a big club, obviously a big club, but to be as competitive as they have been for such a long period of time, obviously has plenty to do with Diego Simeone. But you also need a strong executive level at the club in order to do that. And he's been a big part of that in terms of recruitment, in terms of sales. There's hits, there's misses, of course, but it's a pretty impressive and strong track record, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think, just on history, on the money available to them, obviously, Atletico Madrid shouldn't be near Real Madrid and Barcelona almost every single year, but they are. They're in the title race again this year in La Liga, and they've obviously won a couple over the last while. I think one since Berta's been at the club. So yeah, I think that speaks for itself. The record, they often go far in the Champions League. And if that's a squad that he's had a big hand in helping put together over the last, 7-8 years or so, then obviously that's really impressive. I think like you mentioned Simeone there, and I find that interesting. I think a lot of players haven't worked out at Atletico Madrid, but I think that's more to do with Simeone and having to be a certain way and play a certain way to play for him. I don't think it's because they've spotted players and the players are bad players. I think you have to be very particular, not just player, but probably personality to fit in and work with Diego Simeone. So I don't think it's necessarily, a bad deal has been done when a deal maybe hasn't worked out at Atletico over the last while. But I find that dynamic interesting, that Arsenal would maybe go for a sporting director that it hasn't been the man who's running the club, if you like, at the club that he's been at, because that is Diego Simeone at Atletico Madrid. It's something I think about actually quite often, is something that Unai Emery said, I think just before he took the Arsenal job in an interview in France. And he talked about clubs always having and needing sort of that person leading the club. And he said at PSG, he had to quite quickly recognise and accept that that's Neymar when he got there, and at Real Madrid, it could be all types of roles at the club. He said at Real Madrid, it's Florentino Perez. At Manchester United for a long time, it was Sir Alex Ferguson, or at Arsenal, it was Arsene Wenger. And I think Atletico is that model where it's not the president, it's not a star player, it's not a sporting director, it is Diego Simeone, and that's a path that it feels like Arsenal have gone down as well. If there's somebody setting the culture at the club, setting the vision for what Arsenal want to be and need to do, it is Mikel Arteta.
Sure.
So that marries, I guess, to go and appoint somebody who's not going to be in a power struggle and want to be the guy necessarily, based on his experience anyway at Atletico Madrid. Maybe wouldn't expect to come in and then dictate everything about Arsenal. But I do wonder, it's something that will play out over the next while, whoever takes this sporting director job. I wouldn't like it personally to be someone who just answers to Mikel Arteta, but somebody who can maybe share a platform at the club and challenge him and push him on, should we do this, and maybe bring different ideas to the table. Obviously, they need to work harmoniously, but I do hope that whoever takes the job isn't somebody who just sort of dances to the tune that Arteta plays.
Yeah, I do think this is, if this is the guy, then it is interesting, because if you do a bit of reading, he's had his ups and downs with Diego Simeone. I think they parted on amicable terms, but there are always going to be those challenging dynamics between a manager and a player, or an executive, should I say, when it comes to what do we need to do here? What should we do? What do you want? What's the best thing for the club? What's the best thing for the team? It's felt to me anyway, like with Mikel Arteta and the position that he's in, that what you're saying about somebody who's got a bit of authority or gravitas or a track record who's coming into the job, they all have to start somewhere, right? So Jason Ado is the guy that people have talked about. Is he going to be the guy? Would he be able to stand up to Mikel Arteta? Does he have the track record? At this moment in time, he doesn't. And I would worry a little bit about that if he was given that job solely on his own, without, let's say, a figurehead, who has that authority and that experience within the job. And I think, Jason Ado could turn out to be a very capable sporting director or technical director at a football club, but do you do you need to cut your teeth somewhere else a little bit, like at a Genoa, like at a Parma, and work your way up to the job of sporting director at a big club? Not because, well, you were there, you're Edu's assistant, or not assistant, but, you're second in command to Edu, I should say. And therefore, you get that opportunity, not by default, because they've gone through a big process on this. But I wouldn't necessarily have the same conviction that he could challenge Mikel Arteta or use all the experience that somebody like Andrea Berta has at European level, working in transfer. I mean, you look at some of the deals that he's done, both in and out of Atletico Madrid, and some of them they didn't work, but some of them are absolutely fantastic. Like, you bring in Rodri from Villarreal, and then you sell him to Manchester City. It was a weird season, obviously, but the season beginning, 2019-20, they sold Griezmann to Barcelona, Lucas Hernandez to Bayern Munich, sold Rodri to Man City, and that was the guts of 240 million. They did another few deals as well. That season was the weird COVID season, right? Where it played out in the end. I think they finished third, a good few points behind the winners that season. I think it was Barcelona who won that season. I could be wrong. But anyway, the following season, they won the title. Mm-hmm. And they brought players in like João Felix, Marcos Llorente, even Kieran Trippier. He is prepared to do some interesting deals, and I think that track record, when Arsenal this season in particular, or this summer in particular, I should say, are going to go out, hopefully, we all keep our fingers crossed, and spend some serious money on the attack. I just feel like having a sporting director with the chops to go and do that, and to sell the club, sell the deal, convince whoever it is we want to sell that player to sell that player to us. I think that is going to be really, really important. I'm not saying Jason Ado can't do it. I would just feel more confident in the ability of somebody with more experience.
Yeah, like you say, the track record, somebody who has gone and done it already and isn't looking maybe to do it for the first time and prove that they can do it. I think at this level, these top sort of operators at these clubs, like, it means relationships exist as well, right, with clubs already. Like you say, the deals that have been done there, that means there are relationships that have been built with the sporting directors or technical directors or chairman or whoever at all these other clubs that you mentioned. Ins, outs, Barcelona, Benfica, with João Felix, with Antoine Griezmann. So I think that's also important. It's also a factor, and it'll be interesting to see how this develops. Like you say, it's nice, almost in inverted commas, to have someone who's maybe butted heads a few times with Diego Simeone. Although I can't imagine there are many people who would work with him and not at some point butt heads with him. But somebody who, has also experienced a demanding, challenging manager who has a very clear way of how he wants his team to play and what he wants them to do. And to have somebody who's dealt with that character, worked with, I should say, not really dealt with, but worked with that character and all of the challenges that come along with it, I think is, a great preparation for someone to maybe work with Mikel Arteta, who, again, is, and I don't mean it in a way to suggest like that I don't trust Arteta or that he's not done a great job, but two minds on this job, or three or four or five are better than one. And I don't think it's healthy for any club to have a manager that just sort of decides everything on their own, and isn't challenged and doesn't have other ways of thinking put towards them. So, other suggestions, especially in the transfer market when it comes to players, I think managers can fall in love with players and then be obsessed with, we've got to sign that guy. Yeah. And there's often maybe 3 or 4 other guys out there who can do a similar job or the same job in a different way that can help the team in different ways. And I think that's really important for me for this appointment, is that it's somebody, with you say the gravitas, the personality, the confidence, all of that, to be able to obviously find common ground and agree with Mikel Arteta, and then go and get deals done that Arteta also wants, but maybe also be able to say, are we sure we want that guy? We could go and get this guy instead. Yeah. And finding common ground, finding consensus, and being able to do the job that way, in a way that you don't go and buy players the manager doesn't want, obviously, but that doesn't mean you only have to go and buy the players that the manager says, I want this one.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, they all have their preferences, managers, but if you want a particular style of player, there are variations. And it all depends on what's left in the budget or what you've got available to work with. That's the other thing, you know?
Variations on the player, but variations on the price and the salaries as well. And if you can get a deal done, it might be a massive deal like the Declan Rice deal. And if you can get it done in a way where you save 10, 15, 20 million, that could mean an extra player coming in. Or it could go towards the pot for a new contract for Bukayo Saka or whatever.
Sure.
So, you know, all of that matters as well. And yeah, it'll be interesting, like you say, to some of the others being linked, being in a job until the summer. It just doesn't work. Like the summer transfer window has to be planned now, or the groundwork has to be done now for Arsenal in June, in the end of May, in June, to be able to get deals over the line and finished and finalised. So players are available, you know, for pre-season. We've seen it before, right? Pre-season comes around. The season ends, players go on holiday, then everything stalls for a while. Pre-season comes around, then the teams start talking again, or the players sit down to talk again, and you end up, you know, flying Arsenal supposedly to Asia this summer. And by the time they get back, then players are only just then joining up with them for maybe the last friendly before the season starts. And obviously that sets everything back when it turns into actually having to start the season and hit the ground running. Yeah,
there is a lot of work to do this summer. You know, the only other one this one just sort of makes the most sense to me in terms of the candidates that we're aware of. It did occur to me that if they did rate Jason Ato very highly and they wanted to bring him into the fold or make him more than the interim guy, someone like Dan Ashworth being appointed as well, with Jason Ato getting, in inverted commas, a promotion, might make some sense because of Ashworth's sort of track record of being that kind of overseeing guy, rather than the guy who's going to go and get those deals done, to use his experience. But then I guess you're making two appointments. You're having to make two jobs. And we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see anyway. But interesting development in that story. So look, we're here to talk about what is a huge game in Arsenal's season, particularly after the way things have gone in the last couple of weeks in the Premier League, where we've fallen too far behind Liverpool to realistically have any chance of overtaking them. So the Champions League becomes more and more important. I suppose the first thing to say is that with everybody fit, this is a game that you would confidently say Arsenal should be favourites for. The playing field is somewhat levelled, isn't it, because of our issues in attack and what we have available to us. So while on paper we probably are still perceived as the favourites, I think this is going to be a challenging 180 minutes. Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, I think so too. I mean, it's a Champions League knockout game, right? And we shouldn't be rolling our eyes at the fact it might be a challenge. And Liverpool, their reward for finishing top of that league phase is now to play PSG in this round. And we've definitely got a slightly more favourable draw than that. I think most people would agree. But yeah, it's going to be a tricky one. We're playing a team that we played last season already, and not too much has changed, I don't think, at PSV since last season. But we did really well at the Emirates, not so well in what was a bit of a dead rubber away from home in the last group game. This time around, obviously, like you say, the playing field is levelled. I think Arsenal fans are kind of wondering how and where chances and goals are going to come from. Will we create enough? We all know that it doesn't take much. We've all been on the receiving end of that game that we dominate, and then the one flies in from the opposition from 30 yards, or it's deflected and it goes in, and then suddenly, at the Emirates a week from now, we've got a huge task ahead of us to not just score one, but score at least two, maybe, to come back into the game. So I think it's really, really important for us to go and play well defensively, keep a clean sheet, see what we can create, see if we can create a little bit more as those relationships. There's been time to work on the training pitch for about a week now before this game. Have those relationships between this sort of new look attack started to form a little bit more solidly? be it Nwaneri with Ødegaard and with Timber on the right-hand side, Trossard and Declan Rice on the left, and Mikel Merino up front, and all of them together. Are they starting to gel a little bit more in training? Because I don't think we'll see anything other than that lineup again, that sort of front line of Trossard, Merino and Nwaneri. So it'll be interesting. Can we create more than we did against Forest, who are a good side defensively? Forest too, I think it should be said. And after West Ham, I wasn't too disappointed if the focus was more on, right, we've got to keep a clean sheet and make sure we're defensively solid, because with the injuries that we do have, that's the part of the game that we can rely on to sort of be at its usual level and make sure we do get through this tie.
You took my next question away, really. I was going to ask you about the lineup and whether you think there is anything different that Mikel Arteta can do. And we've had this conversation a few times over the last couple of weeks because of the injuries, and without Kai Havertz, without Gabriel Martinelli, without Bukayo Saka, without Gabriel Jesus, we've run the rule over Sterling starting or not starting, and Ryan on the Arsecast, Ryan Hunn on the Arsecast on Friday was sort of in the, well, you could start him because then at least you have an impact player on the bench, which I think is something we'd all want, but it's how much you hamstring yourself without wanting to cause anybody any sort of alarm there by using the word hamstring. Do you hamstring yourself too much from the start by using Raheem Sterling? And then do you get anything from him from the bench? And then it's like, I don't mean to say what is the point of Raheem Sterling, but I understand why the manager has a very difficult decision to make. I thought against Forest, we were better than we were against West Ham, which may be a low bar, right?
I was going to say, wow.
Yeah, I know. It's a low bar, but I did think we were slightly better. Is that the best hope? That we can be slightly better again while maintaining that kind of defensive discipline, that defensive shape? Forest had a couple of moments, didn't they, in the game, but nothing really, really dangerous. If we can keep PSV and to nothing and nick a goal, then it's a good night's work for Arsenal. So it strikes me that when Mikel Arteta thinks about this game, he's going to recognise that he's got a lot of problems in attack. He's got a lot of problems with his team not scoring goals. It feels like a lifetime. It is only 2 games, of course, but as soon as you stop scoring, it's the biggest problem in football, isn't it? You can't see a way to fix it. It's just like insurmountable in a way. And then, of course, when you start scoring again, it sort of fades away into the background a bit. But do you think it is going to be a case that Mikel Arteta will say, okay, I recognise the problems. I'll go as strong as I can possibly go in attack, but let's make sure that in this leg we do not concede?
Yeah. I don't think there's any other way to approach not just this game, but this sort of period until the international break, when we get somebody back at least. Martinelli probably is a bit further ahead than Saka. Whoever comes back first, or if they come back at the same time, whatever the way that works out, I don't think there's much choice until then. I think these are games where Arsenal will not play great football and score loads of goals in this next period. PSV, United, PSV again, and Chelsea coming up. Like, these are games where Arsenal need to get results, and it doesn't matter how, and it won't be pretty. And it'd be the same the other way around, right? If Gabriel and Saliba were out, but we had Saka and Havertz and Martinelli, we'd be saying, like, right, throw everything let's score 4, 5, let's go for it, because we're probably going to let one in at the other end. If we were missing not just the 2 centre-backs I mentioned, but 3 or 4 key players at the back, you wouldn't lean on the defence to keep a clean sheet. You'd be thinking, right, we've got to go and score 2 or 3 goals then. And I think it's exactly the same here. We're not going to create loads of chances with beautiful flowing football. We might keep a clean sheet. We might be able to deliver a really top defensive performance. And I think especially United and Chelsea is maybe a bit trickier because just the nature of league games, and you can, like West Ham, you have that one lapse and you get punished, and then it's a mountain to climb. Cup games, obviously, we know can be a little bit different, and cup games often are tight and cagey because everything's on the line in that one moment, in that 180 minutes in this case. And I think this is all about, for me, shape, structure, nothing silly, and then backing ourselves, believing that we will get the chance or the couple of chances that it might need to get through in the tie eventually at the other end, and backing the players to create and then take just about enough. But first and foremost, clean sheet, don't give any goals away, and be really, really just a pain in the neck for PSV to break down.
How big of a game is this? Obviously it's a huge game for Arsenal. How big of a game is this for Mikel Arteta? Because we've had conversations about our record in the Cups. We got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League last season, which I think, in our first season back in, the big European competition is not terrible. We went out by a single goal to Bayern Munich. Over the course of those two legs, did we do quite enough? I'm not sure, but, if Bukayo Saka gets the penalty he should have got at the end of the first leg, then maybe it's a different dynamic going into that second leg in Munich. But this season, early FA Cup exit, we didn't do ourselves justice in the Carabao Cup semi-finals, having made good progress in that competition. Over two legs, we didn't turn up in either of those legs and went out to Newcastle. So there is now, with the Premier League gone, the title anyway gone, the Premier League, itself, we've got a lot to play for and a lot of points to play for, and securing top four and securing second place is all we can do, really. So they've got to do that and focus on that and be professional. But the cup competitions then take on a little more importance. So I think for Mikel Arteta, this is a big moment. He's got these challenges. He's got these difficulties, but there's still an onus on him to demonstrate that he can lead a team through a tie like this, after which it's one flavour of Madrid. I don't know if it's going to be Atletico or if it's going to be Real Madrid. Either way, two extremely difficult teams to play against. But first and foremost, he's got to get through this, and he's got to find a way to get his team through this, and sort of show that over the course of his tenure at Arsenal, he is able to. And look, he has done. I'm not saying this is the only time he's faced with troubles and difficulties, but he's got quite a bit going on at this moment in time. But there won't be a lot of forgiveness, it's fair to say, if we don't come through this tie.
No, I think if you do lose to one of the Madrid sides, like you said, or the other big teams left in the competition, Bayern last year, Liverpool, PSG, whoever, there's an element of people can go, you can lose to a great team, and I don't think, with all due respect, PSV have their strengths. Not a great team. They're not a behemoth of European football. They're not a team that might go on and win this competition, and I think that's basic. That's the level of team that this Arsenal team can sort of go out to and it be accepted, is a team that can win the competition. To be on the wrong end of a giant killing is not going to go down well. And it's really not going to go down well if that happens, having sort of drifted away, like you say, in the Premier League, or Liverpool have extended that gap and extended that gap and extended that gap. There's only so much forgiveness for, when you mention injuries and the red cards and all of that, sure. But this is the first time, if you go back, 5 years, this is the first time that it feels like Arsenal aren't this season making progress on last season. And the Champions League is now the only way to change that feeling, and to change the feeling that something is, to sort of regain the feeling or restore the feeling that something is building. I think the last 2 seasons have been so good. They've been in the league fighting for the title. Last year, like you say, got far in the Champions League. This year, it feels like a drop-off. And obviously, there are mitigating circumstances. That it is the red cards, the injuries, and all of that piling up. But, you can flip it and say, well, last season, we're lucky that stuff didn't happen. The red cards, the injury. It all could have just happened last season, and then last season wouldn't have gone as well as it did, even without a trophy at the end to show for it. But it was a good season. You want to feel like that progress is there. That progress is continue. It's never going to be linear, but it is continuing. And I think if we were to go out against PSV, not just in a quarterfinal again against Real Madrid, say, but to go out already against PSV would feel like a huge step backwards, even with the injuries. You still look at the team that we can put out and you compare it to the team that PSV will put out, and they do have some good players. They do play good football. They're on a rough run of form at the moment, but they are a really good side. They've had some impressive results again this season, but they're not a team that Arsenal shouldn't be beating just because Arsenal don't have a couple of forwards available. And Leandro Trossard would fancy his chances, I'm sure, of being in the PSV side, and I'm sure Ethan Nwaneri would fancy his chances of being in the PSV team. Mikel Merino as a striker, maybe not, but there are enough players here. That's just the sort of damaged front line without even getting to the other positions for Arsenal to still dominate this game and put on if not a convincing performance, the result that we all want, at least.
Let's talk a little bit about PSV then and the opposition that we'll face. Peter Bosz quite well from his time in Germany. Spent a little bit of time at your Borussia Dortmund, but was also at Bayer Leverkusen as well. What sort of philosophy does he bring, and what way is he going to set his PSV team up for this game? And I think as well, we talk about Arsenal and what we're missing. I suppose the flip side of that from a PSV point of view is it might inform the way that they approach this game. They might feel this is the moment to really have a go at Arsenal because we don't have the attacking depth that we might have. So we're not quite as potent up front as we would normally be with the likes of Saka and Martinelli, etc. So could that inform the way they play? Could they take a few more risks at the back or in terms of how they build up, etc., etc.? So, let's start with that first.
Yeah, I'd say Peter Bosz has sort of Ange Postecoglou type football. And I think that what I mean by that is it can cut through teams. The aggression, playing on the front foot, going forward, driving forward. It can cut through teams on a good day. And on a bad day, it can leave you wide open. And you get battered by a good side or beaten by a poor side. And I think that's the gamble, the coin toss of playing that type of football. Obviously, we see it with Tottenham, much to our delight. Peter Bosz is maybe a little bit further down the road. He's a bit more, at least at this level of European football especially, more experienced than Postecoglou, has had more time to reconsider that philosophy, that way of playing, and I think has become not more pragmatic, but a bit more realistic, and is looking for ways still to improve the team and that philosophy and that way of playing. So like Arsenal last season, like we said, Arsenal battered PSV at the Emirates last season in the group stage, and there was an interview with Bosz in the Athletic halfway through last season, and he talked then about we played really well that day and we had no idea how that happened, and that him and his staff went back and watched the game, and then they actually showed it to their players and sort of took something from Mikel Arteta. And they said the thing that they couldn't believe was every time they won the ball and they looked to attack and get forward, how quickly Arsenal had 11 men behind the ball again. And that he sort of, right, we're taking that, we're showing the players that, and we're implementing it, because that was the difference. He said they came away from London, the players didn't feel like they'd played badly, he didn't feel like they'd played badly, and watching it back, that was the difference. It was Arsenal's hunger and desire to defend and to get back behind the ball after losing it when a dangerous situation looked like it was developing. So there is still, I think, a humility there, a manager who wants to learn and take things, and maybe has realised you have to have that fire in your belly defensively as well, and it's not just all about playing with the ball, but primarily they do want to have the ball, they do want to play out from the back, they do want to dominate possession. And I think that's teams like that, often it's on the break, and with Peter Bosz's team certainly it's on the break that you can hurt them. And right now Arsenal, we don't know if we really have the players to hurt teams on the break as much as we would like when those opportunities do present themselves. So it'll be interesting, I think, to see, do we look to dominate the ball against a team that wants to do that themselves but does fly forward quickly, or do we trust ourselves in that shape, that 4-4-2 defensive shape, sit in that block and don't let them through? I think that's the decision a little bit for Mikel Arteta and his staff to make, and it might inform our selection too, maybe who plays left back especially.
Sure.
I think it'll be an interesting game, because PSV definitely will. Not only, I think, would they go for it anyway, especially at home, with the injuries that we've got, I think they'll be seeing this as an opportunity to hurt us and to get at us and go through to the quarterfinals.
For sure. I mean, their results in the Champions League this season, they've been up and down a bit. They lost to Brest. They lost to Juventus. But in the second leg of they lost to Juventus twice, because they played Juventus in the group stage as well. Their opening game, they lost 3-1 to Juventus. They lost 2-1 to Juventus away from home in the knockout round, but 3-1 after extra time to see them through in this particular tie. Like I said, they beat Liverpool as well, 3-2, which is not easy to do. So there is something about this team, a little inconsistency perhaps, but there is something about them. Are there sort of key players that Arsenal need to look out for?
Yeah, like I think that aggression and playing, they'll press high, but not just press high, but really drive forward with the ball and look to play through the lines and not have possession for possession's sake, I guess. So I think in midfield, Joey Veerman is sort of more the number 6, number 8, who will look to dictate play and play those, I guess, Jorginho-esque through balls and really look to put PSV on the front foot. Not physically the player that you'd be worried about necessarily, driving past men and beating players and taking players on. But I think a very smart midfielder, 1-2 touch, get the ball forward, I guess, not as physical, but maybe a proxy for sort of a Granit Xhaka type player who really, when PSV are playing well, is the player to look out for, who can dictate a game and probe that back line with through balls and look for those balls out for the wingers and whatnot. And I think in front of him as well, Saibari is, I think, a player who's done really well in the Premier League this season and caused Arsenal some problems early in the season, was Morgan Rogers. And I think Saibari is a similar sort of player to him. A number 10, but really wants to get in the box. He creates stuff too, but drives into the box with the ball, without the ball, runs off the ball, but as well with it at his feet, in possession, a good dribbler, physical, powerful runner, and a really good movement. So wanting to get on the end of things. That midfield area, PSV will stretch the pitch and the wingers will stay wide and they'll press high. In possession, I think for Arsenal, it will be about those through balls, those runs from deep, those switches out wide, and then it goes over to the other wing. If Arsenal are in that defensive block, you're going to have to defend both sides of the pitch. You're going to have to defend those spaces between the fullback and the centre-back, where those runs come from. Saibari as more of a number 10, but also come from the wing-backs coming inside, making those runs inside the winger, underlapping. So I think it's, if Arsenal are in that compact 4-4-2 block, defending in our own half, PSV will, they come up against that, not at our level maybe, but they come up against that all the time in the Eredivisie, obviously the amount they dominate games there. And they know how to break those teams down and be relentless in trying to break those teams down too. So, I think we're going to have to be switched on for 90 minutes.
If I had to ask you to pick a key man for Arsenal, I mean, the first one that springs to mind for me, obviously, is Martin Odegaard. And if he can find a tune, then Arsenal are more likely to find a tune as well. I am curious about Declan Rice. I feel like, I'm not saying he's playing within himself or inhibited in any way, but just hasn't quite hit the level in terms of, what he was doing last season, getting into positions around the box. Maybe it's more difficult when you've got Mikel Merino up front and you're sort of crossing lanes, if you like. But I think those two in particular, for me, we can all discuss and debate the front three, but there isn't really a great deal of choice. It's either Trossard, Merino, Nwaneri, or you fit Raheem Sterling in for one of those players, if that's your particular poison, right? But the two players behind that front three, I think there's a big responsibility on those guys for us. If we are going to break our goal-scoring drought, getting more from those two in particular feels like a really, really important piece of the puzzle, if that's the way of putting it.
Yeah, I obviously agree. You've got them two as goal threats as well. Like you said, Rice getting into the box, but Odegaard too. Those positions that we know he likes to get into that cut-back area and sweep home. If the goals aren't going to reliably come from the front three, then they're the next two players you're looking at, Rice and Odegaard breaking into the box to get on the end of something. And Rice with his driving runs, especially, we mentioned before about there might be opportunities here on the break. Well, Declan Rice running with the ball, when he's at it, that's a way to really use those openings and create something from there. Yeah, I think it's both in terms of them two getting on the end of something, but also laying a foundation for the front three. Like, I don't think it's unrealistic to think this front three are going to carry Arsenal to any results. For those three to play well, you probably need Rice and Odegaard to play really well behind them and give them a platform to deliver. So yeah, I think that would be really important. Like you say, I think we'll see Lewis Skelly probably at left back, and
I agree. Yeah,
he doesn't get as far forward as Calafiori, who was playing at times almost up front alongside Mourinho at Forest, especially in the first half before he came off. I think Lewis Skelly playing at left back is not as sort of freewheeling in his positioning. He's more likely to sit alongside, if it's Partey or Jorginho, whoever at the base of that midfield. And that should hopefully allow Rice the freedom to get going and join Mourinho in the box and go out to the left and help link with Trossard. So, hopefully that'll be behind him a solid base with Lewis Skelly in midfield coming in from that left-back position to allow him to go and have a bit more of an impact and influence in the opposition box, around the opposition box. And I think Ethan Nwaneri too. I think if we look at this Arsenal team, if there's going to be a moment of magic from somewhere, whether it's a run that really breaks the opposition defence open or a shot from distance, which we've seen plenty from him, when you're looking for inspiration, you're looking for someone to create something out of nothing. He looks like the most likely recently. The games against West Ham and Forest were a little bit quieter from him, but he does look like the most likely to pull a rabbit out of the hat. And if you go back and look at the PSV game that they lost in Turin, the first leg to Juventus, almost everything Juventus created came down that right-hand side, the PSV's left. So I think Nwaneri, Timber, I'm assuming it'll be Timber. Ben White's barely played any football. It'll be Timber probably on that right-hand side. That's an opportunity there. Support Nwaneri, get around him, offer him an option, make sure he's not doubled up on. I think that happened too easily against West Ham, too easily against Forest, obviously, as teams are seeing him more and learning more about him and know that he is dangerous. There was a real effort from both those sides to make sure he wasn't isolated against the left back. And it's Odegaard and Timber's job then to take men away with runs and make sure Nwaneri either gets the ball before he's doubled up, but then also make those movements to take men away from him. So he does have a little bit of space to cut inside and get those shots off, because I think that might be our best road to goal at the moment. Yeah, I agree. And he did score our last Champions League goal, the great strike he scored against Girona. If he can get himself into those positions, he's certainly more than capable. Arsenal fixture news reporting that Arsenal would be playing, by the way, I was just going to say, with regards to Lewis Skelly, I think maybe, Calafiori as an impact player, somebody who can change the dynamic a bit, makes a bit of sense too. But we'll wait and see what Arteta does. Arsenal will be playing in black shirts with white shorts because PSV wear black shorts for their home game. So there's a kit clash. I do kind of like those. We do have another away kit. Yeah, we got the light blue one that we could wear, I guess. But like if half of your away kit clashes with the opposition's home kit, don't you just wear the other away kit? Why do we have three kits? I don't know. But I do have some memories of Arsenal wearing some strange kits. Was there the all red, like red shorts one year? There was a in Rome, Thierry Henry scoring a hat-trick in the away shirt, but the home shorts and socks. Yeah, the white shorts. Yeah, what a hat-trick that was, with a brilliant free kick was one of those. I remember as well, it was our home game. Why? I can't remember why we had to change kit, but did we have like a blue
shirt with yellow shorts and stuff.
Yeah, we wore the away kit at home against Sparta Prague way back, and Thomas Rositzky playing for Sparta Prague.
Wow,
it was like early 2000s.
There's one back in the 90s as well. I remember Lee Dixon wearing, could have been against Lons or somebody like that, with Lee Dixon wearing. He's just the guy in my mind. Obviously, the whole team wore that kit, not just Lee Dixon. It wasn't just Lee Dixon going, yeah. For him. Oh no, I brought the wrong bag. Sorry, lads. So we'll see how we look on that. Just a couple of quick things to finish us off before we go. Which is also a part of these preview podcasts, by the way. If you're a first-time listener, we do tend to branch off and do other stuff quite often, but that's part of the fun. Pep Guardiola talking about the FA Cup ball. Now, Mikel Arteta made some comments about the ball in the Carabao Cup game, about how it's different. I think that's basically all he said. The ball is different, and he was roundly castigated for that. Pep Guardiola is talking about the ball in play in the FA Cup. He says it's not a good ball. The Premier League ball is a proper ball. The Champions League ball is a proper ball. This is not a proper ball. He said it after his team won, of course. The way comments like this get reported differently is interesting, isn't it? When one manager is saying something a lot less than the other one, but the other one's sort of being reported in good faith, it does tend to get on your nerves a little bit.
It does. My advice to Mikel Arteta in future would be, if you have a complaint about something that does seem a little unusual, air it after we've won a game. Like you say, Man City did win this weekend, right? And we played plenty of times in the League Cup this season before Mikel Arteta brought up the ball. Yeah. And we won those fixtures. And then he only mentioned it, I think, for the first time after we lost to Newcastle in the home leg. Just if you've got something that might look a bit weird to say, and people are going to turn it into anything you mention after a game is going to be looked at as like an excuse if you've not won.
Sure.
Maybe just do it after the game. On the other hand, he can never win because he was criticised, fairly widely for his comments about Michael Oliver after the Lewis Skelly red card, and we did win that one. The red card didn't influence the result, and then Mikel Arteta said he was furious, and then he was criticised for saying it then as well. Yeah, it was an undercurrent of, well, you won anyway, so get over it, move on. So I don't know. Maybe there is no good time to say something ever.
Yeah, I don't know.
Advice: just don't say anything.
Don't say anything ever. Just sit there doing nothing in your press conferences. I mean, the thing about it is what Arteta said. He said we kicked a lot of balls over the bar. And it's tricky that these balls fly a lot, so there's details that we can do better. It's very different to a Premier League ball, and you have to adapt to that because it flies differently. When you touch it, the grip is very different as well, so you adapt to that. So he's talking about, like, it's different. Maybe this is why we did that. But he's not saying, well, we lost because of the ball.
Yeah.
He is actually saying, when you're used to playing with one ball week in, week out, and then you've got to play with a different ball that's got a different weight. Do you remember like one of the World Cups? Was it South Africa?
I was about to say South Africa in 2010, the Jabulani ball, and it flew all over the place.
Exactly, and all the players
hated it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was about the ball. I think it was more streamlined. It was more perfectly round, if you like. And it just meant sort of it swerved in and out in the air. The goalkeepers hated it. Players, I think there were a lot of long distance goals, but players, it was sort of unpredictable where the ball might actually end up if you really put your foot through it. Sometimes it'd fly over the bar or miles wide, and sometimes it'd just sort of dip just in time and go in the top corner. I think we've all, like, anyone who's played football as well, or grown up playing football, like, how about you? I've kicked footballs. I've kicked beach footballs.
Yeah.
And I've regrettably kicked a basketball, which I wouldn't advise.
No, don't do that.
And like giant tennis balls that are like football sized, and they all feel different and moved. And I'm sure the difference is much less pronounced between an FA Cup ball and a League Cup ball and a Premier League ball. But I'm also sure that these guys that are used to playing with football every single day and used to a certain football. You kick it and you expect it to do a certain thing if you kick it a certain way. And then there is a ball, like you say, that's maybe a slightly different weight or a slightly different size, or slightly more or less hollow, depending on, whatever it's made of. Like, I don't know. I'm sure for these guys that are working with levels of talent that means they have incredible pinpoint accuracy and power behind every time they kick the ball, it must make some sort of difference. It must feel different. And
sure.
It's interesting to think, Puma, who make the League Cup balls, will be making the Premier League balls from next season. What does that mean? Does that mean you, even tactically, do you say, oh, let's shoot from distance more or less often?
Yeah.
Or if we shoot from distance, let's make sure we keep it really low and don't really get much on it. If you're going for the top corner, it's just going to fly off. I think it'll be interesting, penalties too, maybe even.
Maybe so,
if the ball behaves a little bit differently, do you... I mean, that seems like too much to ask from the players. In different competitions, aim for different parts of the goal because the ball's going to behave differently. But I don't know, maybe it's something that has to be considered.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I have to say, I remember years ago, like we would play our Tuesday night Astro, and you go and you get your football, you get your Nike replica balls in fucking Sport Direct or whatever it is, But someone sent me an official Champions League ball, like the proper one, proper 150 quid match ball, and the difference is just astonishing. Everyone,
it's got goosebumps on it almost.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. Yeah. And just the way it feels when you kick it is amazing. And then some wanker on the other team kicked it onto the roof of the school which was beside the pitch we were playing in, and there was no way of getting it back, which, is one of the great regrets of my life. I was going to ask you just a little bit about Michael Oliver, but I don't know if we want to get in. We've got two minutes. Let's just do it very quickly. How surprised were you that...
I don't want to broadcast my thoughts on Michael Oliver again.
We don't want Barry Glendenning giving out to me again. I have to say I was astonished, that a referee who immediately issued a red card to Miles Lewis-Skelly for a trip looked at that incident and didn't immediately take a red card out for the Millwall goalkeeper. I cannot square that circle. I've seen, I think it's Barney Ronay in The Guardian saying Michael Oliver, well, he waited for VAR to do its job, and that's the way it should have gone. This is the way the process works. I don't agree.
Well, no, because then no ref would ever give anything.
Exactly.
If there's VAR available. Then we might, that makes no sense, I don't think. Not to me, anyway.
Not to me either.
Michael Oliver, what do I think about Michael Oliver?
Well, what do you think about the incident at the weekend? Leave aside...
I think it would be quite a funny... I said to a friend, texted a friend on Saturday after I'd seen it, I think it would be quite a funny bit if Michael Oliver now never sent anyone off again, because the Miles Lewis-Skelly thing blew up so massively.
Traumatizing.
Because of you, Andrew.
Because of me, yeah, all my fault.
So I think you've intimidated Michael Oliver into... being fearful of ever sending a player off again, unless he has absolutely no choice.
Behold my incredible power here, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
By the way, the Lewis-Skelly one, VAR didn't correct it. So for Michael Oliver to now rely on VAR to give him the right decision doesn't make any sense as a process.
Ding,
right?
ding, ding, ding. Correct.
So that's obviously just nonsense. What did I think? I thought that Jean-Philippe Mateta, who I hope is recovering well, was very obviously kicked in the face, and I find it crazy that any referee wouldn't immediately give a red card because it's like these things obviously for the refs they happen very quickly and you only get one angle and all of that stuff. But this wasn't I think you said in the blog yesterday his view wasn't obscured. You could see that in some of the images. It's just going in at that height, whether it was the boot or the knee or whatever Michael Oliver actually saw. You could see that Mateta was clearly hit in the head, and at that point, it doesn't really matter what part of the goalkeeper hit Mateta. It doesn't matter if he got anything on the ball. What matters is that somebody was hit in the head by a leg or a foot at head height, and that's just a red card immediately. No questions asked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully Mateta makes a full and speedy recovery. He needed 25 stitches and oxygen. So
25 stitches I read on his, did Palace say on his ear? Which
yes.
to the extent, I'm like...
I feel like they had to.
That's like
his enough
ear
to
was
put
hanging off or something.
Yeah, or it was split in two, or who knows?
I struggle to even imagine how you can fit 25 stitches on one ear. So that, that's nasty.
Very, very nasty, and I think Michael Oliver got it really wrong. But there you go. Not for the first time.
I think for a referee who's recently had a red card overturned. Sort of unanimously, pretty much by the footballing world, agreed that he made the wrong decision in the Miles Lewis-Skelly one. I think to have another, like so quickly afterwards, to have another really badly wrong decision should at least mean that he's sort of, I mean, he's on UEFA's list for sort of top referees and does the Champions League games and stuff as well. But at least in terms of PGMOL and the FA, I think it would be sensible for a while. I don't think his career should be over. I don't think he should be cancelled. No, but to maybe give him a bit of time off of really high-profile games, because it's just going to blow up again and again if he makes another big mistake before the season's over. Can you imagine like an FA Cup semi-final or a big Manchester derby or something? Like, I just don't think for the time being, I think it would be sensible to keep him, for his own sake too, keep him off those games, maybe give him a quiet end to the season and try to start with a bit more of a clean slate when August rolls around.
Well, I look forward to Michael Oliver taking charge of our game on Sunday at Old Trafford. Everybody else out there, probably. All right, look, we had better leave it there. Lewis, as ever, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Andrew.
To you guys who've been listening, whether you're a Patreon member or not a Patreon member, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you're not a Patreon member, please consider joining us. You get this and lots more besides, and it helps support everything that we do on Arseblog. You can sign up for just $6 a month to get instant access to everything at patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, though, take it easy. You can join myself and James on Wednesday morning for an Arsecast Extra. Until then, though, take it easy, and we will catch you on the next one.